open call my sister took me to. She was like, "You're really funny. You should do acting." And I was like, "Great. What? What does that mean?"
It definitely wasn't your typical Hollywood path.
It was like watching your boyfriend take another woman out every day, but like to your favorite restaurant, at your favorite table, having your favorite dessert. And I was like, this is hard.
And it got even harder.
When I did book This Is Us, even I had to borrow money to go to the audition. I didn't even have enough money for gas.
But trust me, she's inspiring. Award-winning actor and musician Chrissy Metz today on The Pulse.
You are going to get a lot of emotions, folks.
So welcome to The Pulse. We're excited to be back again. We have exciting, informative, inspiring individuals who are doing a bunch of different things in a bunch of different fields. And we have another one of those people who I don't know if we call her actor, that check, best-selling author, check, singer, performer, check. Chrissy Metz joins us. How are you today?
Well, hi, I'm well. Thank you for that really sweet introduction.
You're shaking your head at me. Oh, that's true.
It's true, but I think I'm shaking my head because I'm like, oh, I did those things? I'm doing those things? Wow. Yeah.
That's good. And that's why it's so inspiring for people. But thank you for doing this. I appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure.
Before we started the recording, you and I were talking, and I do research for everybody that we talk to. And you've got some stories. Like you've been through some things getting to this day.
Well, it's interesting. I was the youngest child that my mom remarried and had my two younger sisters. And I was always sort of the entertaining diplomat. Like I could always see both sides of everything. I'm also a Libra, and yes, I love astrology. And so I'm always, I don't want anybody to feel bad, and I want to, make them happy. But then I found myself sort of looking outward to find validation through other people of their happiness, and if that would make me happy. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's not always the case, and it took me many, many years to understand that I have to come first as opposed to always trying to make everybody else happy and being a people pleaser. And I think that ultimately that's helped me with my acting because I have a sense of empathy and a desire to want to please people, but also in my adulthood, I've understood boundaries. Music was my first love, and it was something that I grew up with and around. And it was sort of pushed to the wayside. And my manager, who I met in Florida at an open call my sister took me to, I wasn't even there to audition myself. She sort of didn't encourage the music side. And she was like, "You're really funny. You should do acting." And I was like, "Great. What? What does that mean?" And then I got an agent, moved to LA, and I was like, "Oh, my life is starting.
Here we go, right?
Look at me, little girl, just from a small town, just trying to live her dreams." And then my manager said that my agent needed an assistant. Yeah. And I was like, that's great for her. That's so great. And I was like, "Oh, you want me to do it?" I was like, what if she gets to know me and hates me and drops me as a client, and then I have to move back to Florida? Like, that's what?
And I read about you working with your agent assistant, or what have you. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that, because you got gigs, or a couple, like you started to work. So it's one of those things where on the outside, you seemed like you were walking the path to success, but still working as the assistant of your agent.
I'm always rooting for the underdog. And when we get mail-in submissions, I'm like, we should open up all of them, and we should help all the people who need to be helped. And I realized, like, I was just a girl from a small town who wanted somebody to believe in them. So I would do that. And she's like, "You're really good at this, and people really like you." And I'm like, yeah, but that's not what I want to do. Like, I want to act. And she's like, "No, I know, but like, you can go on auditions when you have them and then work for me." And I was like, okay. But I got maybe a handful of auditions once a year. Okay. And most people were getting 5-10 auditions, sometimes a day, sometimes a week. And so it was really hard. I always joke and say it was like watching your boyfriend take another woman out every day, but like to your favorite restaurant, at your favorite table, having your favorite dessert. And I was like, this is hard. Like, I'm grateful for the experience and I'm happy for those people, but like, I want to be doing that. And so Devon Franklin, who produced the movie Breakthrough I starred in a couple years ago, this always rings true now, especially on, in hindsight. But he says you have to learn to carry a crown before you can wear one.
Life
So
always looks better looking back, doesn't it? You kind of
always,
look back, you can look back at the journey and say, that's what that was preparing me for. I wish I knew it while I was going through it.
I know, because in the moment you're like, what is this actual hell I'm living in? It's crazy. So, and I was broke and living paycheck to paycheck, and I mean, obviously, a lot of people are in this country, and it's so unfortunate. And I'm fortunate enough to like have pursued something that became a success, which I never thought would happen. But when I did book This Is Us, even I had to borrow money to go to the audition. I didn't even have enough money for gas. Like
Mm-hmm.
you have to have $20 at least minimum on your
Yeah.
credit card or your debit card for them to process. I had 81 cents in my bank account. So I had none, no, nothing.
So that's true. I read that story. So legitimately, you had 81
No.
cents and not enough money for gas before you go book a role that ended up being life changing and one of the largest roles ever. That was real.
Yes. Oh, it's so real.
Next on The Pulse, a panic attack at the movies, it changed her whole career path.
Oh, this is it. I'm gonna die watching The Expendables. With this is how I'm gonna go. And I was like, this is not cool.
Welcome back to The Pulse. Today we're spending some time with somebody who's got such a great story, so inspirational. So let's get right back to Chrissy Metz. I also read a panic attack story where you kind of looked back at this isn't what I want my life to be. Like, tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was married to an angel of a human being. We're still friends, but ultimately we understood in hindsight, of course, that we just weren't destined to be together, at least not forever. We were just very different people. And I also was, still working as an agent and just very unfulfilled and unhappy. And my body was keeping the score. And so when I'm sitting in this movie theater and this panic attack arises, I'm like, oh, this is it. I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die watching The Expendables. With this is how I'm gonna go. And I was like, this is not cool. So of course, an ambulance came, put me on a stretcher, and they were like, did a full workup, and they're like, you're fine, you're healthy, but I think you might have anxiety. And I'm like, what's anxiety? What in the world? Yeah. And so it really caused me to just take a pause and understand that like there was something that my body was trying to tell me. And it was that I was just so unhappy and doing things for everybody else. And I was too afraid to sort of pursue that.
Panic attack in the movie theater drove you into TV and movies.
Well, I mean, yes.
Kind of.
It made me realize that I was unhappy and I needed to figure out what was going to make me happy.
Yeah.
So
This Is Us, which we can talk about, tremendous success, like not on our network, but it's over now, so whatever. Tremendous success. Congratulations to you. That was amazing.
Yeah.
But it was also seemingly, again, as I read your story and now that we're friends for a really long time, right. I hear about your story and it almost sounds like there were parallels. Like the character in some ways was you in some ways were the character. You seemingly very open sharing these types of stories about what you went through, like character aside. Yeah. Why are you so comfortable putting all that out there?
It's funny. Sometimes I question that myself because I see some actors who are just so insular and like protective. And there has to be a certain degree that you do that because as big as people big you up, they also want to watch you fall. And so unfortunately, it doesn't matter what I say or do, somebody's going to have something to say about it. But for me, I realized that my catharsis was like sharing what was going on and then having people turn around and say, oh my gosh, I went through that same thing. I had that relationship with my father or a lack of relationship with my father, or I had a panic attack in a movie theater. Like the more specific I would get with my story, I would be relating to other people and they would relate to me. And I was like, oh, this is maybe I can help people. It's not about like my ego. It's literally about how do I get through it? What did you do? Oh, and you did this? Oh, okay. This is how we get through the hard times in our lives. And also, I mean, there's of course things that I keep to myself.
Yeah.
But generally, I'm just a person who feels like if I've gone through it, I can be courageous enough to help other people to understand they're not alone either.
But you don't see a
And
lot of that on TV. Like you certainly don't see a lot of that I mean, you see a lot of that character on TV. You don't see a lot of people who work in that field and in that industry who are willing to do that. Do you think that that's part of the reason why everything I read about you is like she's so relatable and people love her and it's kind of turned into this role model for all types of people? You think that's why?
yeah, I think they're like, oh, that's my friend. I know her. I am her. Or I know someone like her. And she makes me feel like I'm less alone. Whether it's somebody who's not a straight size and, as a plus size woman, it's like we don't really see those characters on network television. And we surely didn't for a very long time. And now, of course, the tide is changing. Thank goodness. But I think they were like, oh, if she can do it, can't I do it? And so I think that it was inspiring to see that journey and for me to be open and honest about it because it wasn't easy
Yeah.
and it wasn't what my ego wanted. 12 years in the making and me almost moving back home to Florida to teach preschool again. It was like, no, there's not a timeline necessarily, and you should do what your heart tells you should do.
Up next, Chrissy Metz explains no matter how many critics exist, it's really all about you.
When somebody does say something and it stings, I'm like, oh, it stings because I think it's true.
And you talked about being a plus size woman in Hollywood. And I've read about the struggles that so many people go through. You lost 50 pounds, 100 pounds, and then gained some of it back, and then lost, and kind of going back and forth. But you, unlike a lot of other people, did it very publicly.
I think we're all just trying to figure out this thing called life, which is like life on life's terms. And sometimes we have great days, great months, great seasons, and great years. And sometimes we're not well, like I went through a really hard time. My first Emmy nomination, I was so excited. And it was one of the most wonderful times of my life. But my mom had a severe stroke that she almost passed away from. Like, people don't realize everything that's going on in someone's life at any given moment. And for me, food is something that was always comforting and that I could reach to sort of make myself feel better. And it wasn't until I became an adult that I realized, like, oh, it makes me feel worse if I'm eating over something and eating my feelings, but it's a process and it's not linear. Healing is never linear. So again, doing it publicly is like, whether it's intentional or not, it's like, I hope people are understanding that they're not alone and I don't have it figured out.
I see why people say that you're their friend as soon as they start talking to you. You really are that relatable, sharing stories, kind of easy to talk to. And it comes across like you really are like, yeah, I'm on this hit show and I have all these Emmy nominees and Golden Globe, all this kind of stuff, but I'm here for you.
If I attach to the good of what people say, I have to attach to the bad. And I just try to stay neutral. And so it's really nice when someone says nice things, but they say a lot of awful things. And I'm like, yo, you don't even know me. You can say what you want. And I know it's just their projection, and how they feel about themselves. Because I really do think that, like, if you loved yourself, you couldn't be mean and hateful to other people because it's just like not possible. And so I just try not to attach to any of those things while they're very nice. Yeah. It's really like, how do I feel about myself? And so when somebody does say something and it stings, I'm like, oh, it stings because I think it's true. And it's something that I'm dealing with that I haven't really gotten over. So, being recognized is lovely, especially when it comes to, awards and nominations. But it can't be everything. It can't.
Like, we went deep.
Oh yeah.
We went through
Oh yeah.
all
Yeah.
these different
Yeah.
issues. We did all these things. That particular show just recently ended. A very successful, 6-season, run with good people. Did you know it was going to be a hit like that?
We all sat around the table like, wow, this is really special. And everybody at this table is really special. But I don't think we knew it was going to be the success that it was, because you just don't know. I mean, you hope that the pilot goes and you hope people latch on, and you hope the writing stays special and true. And it did, of course. And Dan Fogelman is a genius. But there's no way in the world anybody could have predicted that. I certainly didn't.
Coming up, she's a success, no question. But to Chrissy Metz, being a good person, that's what matters most.
It doesn't matter what money you have in your bank account, what numbers on the scale or in the bank account or whatever. Like, we're all going through it and we all have a journey.
You said when we started talking earlier that music was your first love. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you kind of fell into a hit show and doing all of these things.
I did not fall, but it seems like that. It seems that way.
But now, and you never really stopped exploring music, but now you're getting a chance to kind of go deeper into that first love. Is that because you're touring now also?
Yeah, I have a 7-city winery tour coming up at the beginning of August, which I'm very excited about. But music was my first love, and not really encouraged, as I said, with my own first manager. And it was really kind of like, wow, what is that supposed to mean? Like, does she not believe in me? And so it took a backseat. And then, when you're trying to be creative and just trying to dabble and trying to find your sound and what makes you happy, I did try to do all that. But it was through playing Kate on This Is Us and having her sort of live in the shadow of her mom, who was an aspiring singer, that I realized, yeah, I really want to do music.
Gonna hear a bunch of no's, and that's just how it goes. So girl, go dream on down that road.
And I really love it. And I was lucky enough to be in the movie Breakthrough that Devon Franklin produced. Mm-hmm. And he actually pitched me to sing the title song, I'm Standing With You. It ended up being Oscar nominated. I sang at the Oscars. And then I ended up getting a really awesome deal with a label, Universal Music Group, Nashville here. And so I was like, okay, all right. Like, things are in the music world, opening up for me. And I think so much was a catalyst was being Kate on the show, because I was able to just like realize how much I wanted it. It's my dog, Mabel.
Oh, yeah?
Clearly there's an Amazon or something package at the door. I'm so sorry, everybody.
It's all right. Celebrities, they are just like us. You're going to be here performing on the East Coast also.
DC, Philly, New York, Boston, Chicago, Atlanta, Nashville.
You will be here with us in Philly, performing here. What do we get from a Chrissy Metz City Winery performance?
You are going to get a lot of emotions, folks. Really, the music that I'm going to be sharing is about love and loss and new love, and also a cathartic sort of introspection after I wrote the book, realizing there were a lot of things that I thought I was healed from, but that were still hurting.
So you're talking about the music, and you kind of segued into, and that's why you wrote the book. So also best-selling author. But that's an interesting question, because we talked about you being so open in sharing your experiences. So many of them out there, and some they're not all positive. Some of them painful. Why take it a step further and write a book? Just put it all out there.
If there's a way that I could hopefully find healing through A, writing it, and B, sharing my experiences and giving life lessons, then it makes sense.
It was surprising to me. I don't know if it was surprising to you how many people say that the book also spoke to them. And I was dealing with this kind of challenge, and I had similar, and it didn't make them feel better that you had as well, but it made them feel seen, I guess.
Yeah, when you read an article about anything or a book or, talk to somebody and you're like, wait, you had that experience?
Mm-hmm.
You feel so much less alone. And you also realize that, like, it doesn't matter what money you have in your bank account, what numbers on the scale or in the bank account or whatever. Like, we're all going through it and we all have a journey. And mine just happens to be more public because I'm in the public eye. But I can relate to anybody who's in the grocery store who, we end up breaking down in the chip aisle because she's sharing her story with me.
We're all about use your voice for good. So I think kind of this whole interview has been about how you're using your voice for good. But is there a specific use your voice for good initiative that you're involved in? Is there a specific message that you want to share with people about using their voice for good?
If you see something, say something. Even though it's really hard and you might rub somebody the wrong way or you might lose a job or whatever, like, I can't stand by and watch people in situations where they're being taken advantage of, or there's injustice or racial injustice and any of those things where people aren't treated fairly. Like, that stuff makes me crazy. And so in any capacity, it might be scary and it might be uncertain, but everybody deserves to be treated well and fairly.
Thank you so much for watching The Pulse today with Chrissy Metz. And it was another one of those situations where the more we spoke to her, the more we found out just how kind, genuine, sincere she really is. It's why I love doing this show, because you learn about people, their experiences, and hopefully they inspire you the same way they inspire me. We'll be back to do it all again, same time next week. Until then, whenever you can, use your voice for good and have a good one.